She was stabbed to death in her own bedroom, naked, bleeding out on the floor. Lying next to her was a man she had never met, shot twice, once in the head, once in the chest. Her husband called 911 and said, "I shot an intruder who was attacking my wife." Case closed, right? Hero husband defends his family? Wrong. Because what police found in that house would expose one of the most twisted murder plots I have ever covered. The husband was a federal agent who spent his career catching criminals. The family au pair was his secret lover. And the dead man on the floor was not an intruder. He was a patsy, lured to that house through a fetish website, tricked into thinking he was meeting a woman for a date, set up to take the blame for a murder that prosecutors say was planned for months. And the worst part? Their 4-year-old daughter was in the basement while her mother was being killed upstairs. What I am about to tell you will make your skin crawl. Before we begin, I need to warn you this case will disturb you in ways you cannot imagine, and if you're still watching, you're clearly interested in real cases told in full. Like, share, subscribe now, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. Before I tell you about that morning, I need to tell you about Brendan Banfield, because what she did for a living makes this case even more tragic. Brendan wasn't just a nurse. She was a sexual assault nurse examiner, a SANE nurse. Do you know what SANE nurses do? They are the first medical professionals to see sexual assault survivors after an attack. They provide trauma-informed emergency care. They collect forensic evidence, the evidence that helps put rapists in prison. They testify in court. Brendan was trained to help the most vulnerable victims of sexual violence. She spent her career caring for people in their darkest moments. Before moving to Virginia, Brendan worked with the Victim Information Bureau of Suffolk in New York. She was their clinical nurse supervisor. Her colleagues said she was available 24/7 to consult on difficult cases. She provided support during complicated examinations. She helped survivors navigate the worst days of their lives. In 2019, she left New York to take a position at Inova Fairfax Hospital in Virginia. She planned to join the SANE program in her new community so she could continue to use her skills to help those affected by abuse. That's who Brendan Banfield was, a nurse who dedicated her life to helping sexual assault survivors. And according to prosecutors, her husband used a sexual fetish website to orchestrate her murder. The woman who helped survivors of sexual violence was killed in a scheme that weaponized sexual fetishes. If that doesn't make you sick, nothing will. February 24th, 2023. Herndon, Virginia, a quiet suburb about 25 miles west of Washington, D.C. The Banfield family lived in a nearly $1 million brickfront colonial home on Stable Brook Way. It was the kind of house you see in magazines, 2 stories, attached garage, manicured lawn. The kind of house where bad things aren't supposed to happen. At 7:45 a.m., Fairfax County dispatchers received a 911 call from a young woman. She was screaming, crying, hysterical. She said a friend was hurt. The call disconnected. 15 minutes later, at 8 a.m., she called again. This time, a man's voice came on the line. "I shot a man because he stabbed my wife." The man was Brendan Banfield, 40 years old, a criminal investigative division agent for the IRS. He had spent his career catching white-collar criminals, fraudsters, tax cheats, money launderers. He knew how investigations worked. He knew what evidence police looked for. He gave the dispatcher the address. He said there were 2 people down. He said his wife had been stabbed. He said he shot the attacker in self-defense. When police arrived at the home on Stable Brook Way, they found a scene that Fairfax County Police Chief Kevin Davis would later describe as horrific and appalling. Brendan Banfield, 37 years old, was in the master bedroom. She had been stabbed multiple times in the neck. She was naked. She was still breathing when paramedics arrived, but barely. She would be pronounced dead at the hospital. Joseph Ryan, 39 years old, was in the hallway near the stairs. He had been shot twice. The first shot struck him near his right eyebrow. Investigators would determine it came from Brendan's IRS-issued service weapon. The second shot struck him in the chest. According to the medical examiner who later testified, it devastated his heart. But that second shot didn't come from Brendan's gun. It came from a Glock that was stored in a safe in the master bedroom's bathroom. And the person who fired it? The 22-year-old woman who had called 911. The family's au pair. Her name was Juliana Perez Magales. Brendan Banfield told investigators a harrowing tale of a home invasion gone wrong. He said he had left for work around 7:10 a.m. that morning, like he did every weekday. He was scheduled to report at 7:30 a.m., but before he could get to the office, he got a frantic call from Juliana saying something was wrong at the house. He rushed back home. He grabbed his service weapon. He ran upstairs to the master bedroom. That's when he saw a stranger, a man he'd never met, holding a knife to his wife's neck. He identified himself as law enforcement. He ordered the man to drop the knife. The man didn't comply. Instead, he plunged the knife into Christine's neck. Brendan fired. He shot the intruder in the head. But the man was still moving, still a threat. That's when Juliana grabbed the other gun from the safe and fired into the man's chest. They had killed the intruder, but it was too late for Christine. For a moment, it seemed like a tragic case of a husband who couldn't save his wife, a homeowner who defended his family but arrived seconds too late. But Police Chief Kevin Davis wasn't buying it. I stood in the middle of a cul-de-sac street in Fairfax County and described the deaths of 2 persons inside of a residential home. Davis would later say at a press conference, "I knew, I suspected. I had a feeling that there was a lot more to what met the eye that morning." He was right, because when investigators started digging, they found something that blew Brendan's entire story apart. There was no forced entry. Joseph Ryan didn't break into that house. Someone let him in. What I've told you so far sounds like a home invasion gone wrong. A tragic night where a husband failed to save his wife. But investigators were about to discover that Joseph Ryan wasn't a random intruder. He was a 39-year-old man from Springfield, Virginia, just a few miles away. He had no criminal record, no history of violence, no connection to the Banfield family. So why was he in their house at 7:37 a.m. with a knife? Because he thought he was meeting a woman named Anastasia 9 for a consensual sexual encounter. He brought the knife because he was told to. It was part of the fantasy. To understand what really happened on February 24th, 2023, we need to look at where Brendan Banfield was that morning. According to search warrant affidavits obtained by investigators, Brendan was scheduled to report for work at 7:30 a.m. He left his neighborhood at 7:10 a.m., but he didn't go to work. He pulled into a nearby McDonald's parking lot, and he sat there, waiting. For 27 minutes, Brendan Banfield sat in his car in a fast food parking lot instead of going to his job as a federal criminal investigator. Why? Because, according to prosecutors, he was waiting for a signal. At 7:37 a.m., his phone rang. It was Juliana. At that exact same moment, 7:37 a.m., Joseph Ryan pulled up to the Banfield home in Herndon. That timing wasn't a coincidence. Here's what prosecutors say was supposed to happen. Brendan leaves the house but doesn't actually go to work. He drives to a nearby location and waits. Juliana takes the couple's 4-year-old daughter and pretends to leave for a day trip to the National Zoo. But moments after leaving, she forgets something and turns back. A stranger named Joseph Ryan arrives at the house. He thinks he's meeting a woman from a fetish website for a consensual sexual encounter. He has a knife because he was told to bring one for role play. Juliana calls Christine's phone to signal that Ryan has arrived. But Christine's phone goes to voicemail. Why? Because Brendan had already cut off her phone and put it in the kitchen drawer. Juliana calls Brendan at the McDonald's. That's the 7:37 a.m. call. Brendan drives back to the house. He and Juliana take the daughter down to the basement, away from what's about to happen. They go upstairs. They discover Ryan in the bedroom with Christine. Brendan yells, "Police!" and shoots Ryan in the head. Juliana shoots Ryan in the chest with the Glock from the safe. While Juliana calls 911, Brendan stabs Christine to make sure she's dead. They claim self-defense. They say Ryan was an intruder who broke in and attacked Christine. Brendan, the hero husband, shot him to protect his family. Case closed. Perfect crime. Except it wasn't perfect, because investigators found the digital trail. Here's something investigators discovered that will make your stomach turn. About a month before the murders, Christine Banfield sent a photo of herself to her husband. Just an innocent picture of her in a one-piece bathing suit. The kind of photo a wife might send to her husband. Hours after Christine sent that photo, it was uploaded to a brand new FetLife profile. FetLife is a social networking platform for people interested in BDSM, kinks, and sexual fetishes. It's been described as Facebook for the kink community. The new profile was created with the username Anastasia9. The profile picture showed a petite woman in a one-piece bathing suit. Christine's photo. The profile purported to be a woman looking for partners interested in violent role play. Specifically, something called blood play, an arrangement where one person deliberately cuts another during a sexual encounter. The profile said the woman cheats on her husband whenever she wants to. But here's what prosecutor Eric Klingen found. There was not one iota of evidence that Christine was into knife play, binding, or BDSM. She didn't create that profile. She didn't know it existed. Her photo was stolen from the message she sent to her husband. Her identity was hijacked, and someone was using both to lure a man to her home. That someone, according to prosecutors, was Brendan. Joseph Ryan went by the username Taco Supreme 7000 on FetLife. His friend Don Arnold would later describe him as an old-fashioned man who respected women. He was 39 years old. He lived in Springfield, Virginia. He had no criminal record. He wasn't a violent person. He was simply someone who responded to what he thought was a legitimate invitation from a consenting adult. Taco Supreme 7000 and Anastasia9 began communicating. They used Telegram, an encrypted messaging app that's popular for its privacy features. They discussed rough sex. They discussed experimenting with blood play. They discussed him coming to her house for what would appear to be a consensual encounter. The plan: Ryan would come to the house. He would tie Christine down. He would use a knife to cut off her clothes. It was supposed to be fantasy fulfillment between consenting adults. At one point, according to defense attorney James Campbell, the users spoke using Telegram's voice call feature. A woman's voice confirmed the plans. She talked about the encounter. She told Ryan what to expect. But that voice wasn't Christine Banfield. According to prosecutors, it was Juliana Perez Magalhães, pretending to be Christine. The 22-year-old Brazilian au pair, hired to take care of the Banfield's daughter, was allegedly on the phone with a stranger, pretending to be her employer, setting up the encounter that would end in two people's deaths. Ryan brought the knife because he was told to. He thought it was part of the role play. He had no idea he was walking into a trap. He had no idea the woman in the profile photo didn't know he was coming. He had no idea he would be dead within an hour. According to prosecutors, this is what happened after Brendan returned from the McDonald's parking lot. Ryan had already entered the house. He went upstairs to the master bedroom. Christine was there. Ryan began doing what he thought was the agreed-upon plan. He held Christine at knife point. He thought she was expecting him. He thought this was what she wanted. But Christine didn't know the plan. She didn't know this man. She didn't know why a stranger was in her bedroom with a knife. Can you imagine her terror? A sane nurse, a woman who had spent her career helping sexual assault survivors, suddenly finding herself at the mercy of a man with a knife who had been lured to her home without her knowledge. Then Brendan and Juliana burst into the room. They were both armed. Brendan yelled, "Police!" and then he fired. The bullet struck Ryan near his right eyebrow. But Ryan was still moving, still alive. That's when, according to prosecutors, Juliana fired the second shot. The one from the Glock that Brendan had told her to retrieve from the safe. That shot struck Ryan in the chest. It devastated his heart. Joseph Ryan was dead. And Christine, according to prosecutors, while Juliana was calling 911, Brendan Banfield stabbed his wife, the man who had vowed to love and protect her, the father of her daughter, the person she trusted most in the world. He plunged a knife into her neck. As we continue, like, share, subscribe now and hit that notification bell. If If Brendan Banfield really was an innocent husband who shot an intruder, his behavior in the days after February 24th makes absolutely no sense. Because within 8 days of the murders, both Brendan and Juliana did something suspicious. They both got new phones, brand new devices. Juliana created a brand new iCloud account, wiping her connection to her old data. Brendan deleted his account activity, erasing whatever digital footprint he could. Why would two people who just survived a terrifying home invasion immediately destroy their digital histories? Unless they had something to hide. Unless they knew that what was on those phones would connect them to the crime. But the new phones weren't the only problem with Brendan's story. A long-awaited forensics report on the blood spatter evidence finally came in, and it revealed something chilling. Brendan Banfield had smeared blood from Christine's wounds onto the body of Joseph Ryan. Think about what that means for a second. If Ryan really was an intruder who stabbed Christine, her blood would naturally be on his body from the attack. It would be on his hands, on his clothes, on the knife. But the blood pattern showed it was deliberately transferred, smeared, staged. Someone took Christine's blood and physically put it on Ryan's body to make it look like he was the one who killed her. That someone, prosecutors allege, was Brendan. Remember, Brendan was an IRS criminal investigator. He was trained to understand how crimes are solved. He knew about forensic evidence. He knew what investigators look for. And apparently, he thought he could stage a crime scene well enough to fool them. He was wrong. Investigators traced the FetLife account back to a computer in the Banfield home. The Anastasia 9 profile that lured Ryan to his death was maintained on Christine's computer. But that didn't mean Christine created it. Think about it. If you want to frame your wife for creating a fake profile, where better to set it up than on her own computer? Prosecutors found, as I mentioned, not one iota of evidence that Christine was interested in knife play, binding, or BDSM. She was a sane nurse, a woman who had spent her career helping sexual assault survivors. The idea that she would secretly be communicating with strangers about violent sexual role play doesn't fit anything else investigators learned about her. She didn't know about the profile. She didn't know her photo was being used. She didn't know a stranger was being invited to her home to do things to her with a knife. But someone with access to her computer did know. Someone who could steal her photo and upload it. Someone who could communicate with Ryan while pretending to be her. And then there was the gun range. In the months before February 24th, Brendan took Juliana to a shooting range in Ashburn, Virginia, multiple times. He purchased a gun from that same range, the Glock that would later be stored in the master bedroom safe. Why would an au pair from Brazil need to learn how to shoot? Why would a man take his children's caregiver to a gun range and buy her a weapon? Unless he was training her, preparing her, getting her ready for the night she would need to fire that gun. That gun, the Glock from the safe, was used to fire the shot that devastated Joseph Ryan's heart. Juliana fired it. The au pair who was hired to take care of a 4-year-old girl had been trained to shoot, given a weapon, positioned to help execute a murder. Of course, none of this makes sense unless you understand one more thing. Brendan Banfield and Juliana Perez Magalhães were lovers. According to prosecutors, the affair began in August 2022, just a few months after Juliana arrived in the United States. She had come from Brazil through a cultural exchange program. She was hired by the Banfields to help care for their daughter. She moved into their home. She became part of the family. And then she became Brendan's secret lover. Photos of the two together were found on Juliana's phone, dating back to August 2022. They were sleeping together while Juliana was literally living under the same roof as Christine, caring for Christine's daughter, eating at Christine's table, spending time with Christine every single day. And Christine had no idea. By fall 2022, according to the plea agreement Juliana would later sign, Brendan expressed his desire to be rid of Christine. Not divorce, not separation. Be rid of. Over the following months, prosecutors say Brendan began fleshing out a plan. A plan that required a stranger to take the blame. A plan that required Joseph Ryan to die. But the most damning evidence of how far the affair had gone came from what police found when they finally arrested Juliana 8 months later. By then, she had moved into the master bedroom, the bedroom where Christine was murdered. Her clothes hung in the closet that Christine once used, and on the nightstand, a newly framed photo of Brendan and Juliana together. The photo was dated October 13, 2023, less than 8 months after Christine's body bled out on that same bedroom floor. Christine's body was barely cold before her husband was displaying photos of his mistress in her bedroom, in her closet, in her bed. The investigation into the Banfield murders would take almost 2 years. 570 days from the morning Christine and Joseph died to the day Brendan Banfield was finally charged. Why did it take so long? Because this case was a mess. Conflicting theories, conflicting evidence, detectives being transferred, evidence being questioned. At one point, there were 24 different theories about what happened that morning. And at the center of it all was a digital forensics battle that almost derailed the entire case. Brendan Miller was a digital forensic examiner with the Fairfax County Police Department. He was assigned to analyze 60 devices connected to the case: phones, computers, tablets. Everything that might contain evidence about who created the FetLife profile and who was communicating with Joseph Ryan. After extensive analysis, Miller wrote his report. His conclusion: Christine Banfield had connected with Ryan through the FetLife platform herself. There is no indication that Christine lost control of her devices during this time. Miller wrote in his executive summary, Christine also has a pattern of being active on her devices during the relevant times over the year leading up to this period. In other words, Miller's analysis suggested there might not have been any catfishing. No fake profile. Christine might have been the one communicating with Ryan all along. This directly contradicted the prosecution's theory that Brendan created the profile to lure Ryan as a patsy, and it created chaos within the police department. According to testimony that would later emerge in court, anyone who disagreed with the catfishing theory was eventually transferred. Miller was transferred out of the digital forensics unit in late 2024. Deputy Chief Patrick Brush, who oversaw the department's Major Crimes Bureau at the time, confirmed in court testimony that he said Miller would never be doing another digital forensics case in your Major Crimes Bureau after Miller submitted his analysis. Brush testified that he disagreed with his summary and felt the data was incorrectly and inappropriately being analyzed. But here's the thing: Miller's work was peer-reviewed by the University of Alabama's police department, and they affirmed his findings. An external, independent review said Miller's digital forensic analysis was correct, and he was still transferred. Miller wasn't the only one who faced consequences for disagreeing with the official theory. Kyle Bryant was the lead detective on the Banfield case. He testified in court that he faced mounting pressure from higher-ups at the department to support the catfish theory. Bryant said he followed what he believed the evidence showed, which wasn't necessarily the theory command staff wanted him to support. He was transferred off the homicide team in January 2025. Brendan Banfield's defense attorney, John Carroll, argued in court, "There are people being removed in conflict with the command staff." He called the investigation a theory in search of facts rather than a series of facts supporting a theory. That's a damning accusation. Carroll was essentially saying that police decided Brendan was guilty first, and then went looking for evidence to support that conclusion, ignoring or suppressing anything that contradicted it. With 12 different homicide detectives working the case, there were, according to prosecutor Eric Klingon, 24 different theories about what happened that morning. Some detectives thought Christine might have actually been in on it, that she knew about the FetLife profile. Some thought Juliana acted alone or was more involved than prosecutors believed. Some thought Brendan's self-defense story might actually be true. The case was in disarray. But then Juliana talked. In October 2024, after spending more than a year in jail awaiting trial, Juliana Perez Magales gave a second interview to investigators. This time, she told them everything. She admitted to the affair. She admitted to the plot. She admitted that she and Brendan used the fetish website to lure Ryan to the house. She admitted to the voice call where she pretended to be Christine. She admitted to firing the shot that devastated Ryan's heart. With 12 different homicide detectives, there were 24 different theories, Klingon said in court. Now, one theory. Juliana's confession changed everything. The prosecution finally had a cooperating witness. Someone who was inside the house. Someone who could testify about what Brendan said, what Brendan planned, and what Brendan did. Chief Judge Penny Askerett of the Fairfax County Circuit Court, the largest trial court in Virginia, is presiding over this case. She found the transfer situation concerning. The transfer that gives the court pause is Miller's because it relates to the theory of this case, she said from the bench. She ordered prosecutors to hand over all documentation about Miller's transfer to the defense, if it might exonerate Brendan. She found that prosecutors had not violated their legal duty to disclose evidence. But she made clear, this case has problems. Problems that the defense will absolutely exploit at trial. As we move on, like, share, subscribe now and hit that notification bell. 8 months after the murders, Fairfax County Police made their first arrest. In October 2023, Juliana Perez Magalhaes was taken into custody. She was 23 years old by then. She was charged with second-degree murder and use of a firearm in commission of a felony, specifically for shooting Joseph Ryan. The woman accused of helping murder Christine had completely taken over her life. Juliana was held without bond at the Fairfax County Adult Detention Center. But Brendan, he wasn't charged. For almost another full year, Brendan Banfield walked free. In April 2024, Brendan was called to testify at a pretrial hearing in Juliana's case. A prosecutor asked him questions about what happened that morning, about his relationship with Juliana, about the FetLife profile, about where he really was when his wife was being stabbed. Brendan declined to answer. He invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The man who claimed to be an innocent husband who tried to save his wife refused to talk about it under oath. He wouldn't answer questions about that morning. He wouldn't answer questions about his relationship with Juliana. He wouldn't answer questions about anything, because answering might incriminate him. On September 4, 2024, the IRS confirmed to reporters that Brendan Banfield was no longer employed by the agency. The federal criminal investigator, the man trained to catch criminals, to follow evidence trails, to build cases against fraudsters and tax cheats, had lost his job. The IRS wouldn't say why he was terminated. They wouldn't confirm whether he was fired or resigned. But 12 days later, Brendan would lose a lot more than his job. He would lose his freedom. September 16, 2024, 570 days after Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan were killed. A grand jury indicted Brendan Banfield on 4 counts of aggravated murder, 2 for Christine's death, 2 for Joseph Ryan's death, and 1 count of use of a firearm in commission of a felony. That afternoon, Fairfax County Police conducted a traffic stop. They pulled over Brendan Banfield. They arrested him. They put him in handcuffs and took him to the Fairfax County Adult Detention Center, the same jail where Juliana had been sitting for almost a year. Police Chief Kevin Davis held a press conference at 5 p.m. I stood in the middle of a cul-de-sac street in Fairfax County and described the deaths of 2 persons inside of a residential home, Davis said. Now, 570 days later, we know the deaths of Joseph Ryan and Christine Banfield were both, in fact, murders. Commonwealth's attorney Steve Descano added, "We have evidence to now allege that Christine Banfield's life was unlawfully taken and Joseph Ryan's life was unlawfully taken." When reporters asked what new information led to the indictment, Descano would only say it was very instrumental. He wouldn't elaborate, but court documents would later reveal what changed: the blood spatter forensics report, and Juliana's cooperation. 3 months later, in December 2024, prosecutors added more charges: child abuse and endangerment, because the Banfield's 4-year-old daughter was in the house when the killings occurred. According to prosecutors, Brendan and Juliana took the child down to the basement before going upstairs to confront Ryan. She was in the basement while her mother was being stabbed to death upstairs. She may have heard the screams. She may have heard the gunshots. She may have heard the chaos that took her mother's life. Prosecutors wanted to use a forensic interview with the child as evidence at trial. The interview reportedly contained her description of what she believed happened the morning her mother was killed, but Judge Askerit ruled the interview inadmissible because the child was not directly victimized by her father, meaning she wasn't physically harmed. Her statements couldn't be used under Virginia evidence law. Legal analyst Eric Faddis called the ruling a significant blow to the prosecution's case. Joseph Ryan's mother. When police called Deirdre Ryan to tell her about Brendan's arrest, she had been waiting 570 days for this moment. Her son Joseph was dead, killed by people who used him as a prop in their murder scheme. Manipulated, set up, disposable. I was grateful that they arrested my son's murderer, she told reporters. Her son's murderer, not just the woman who fired the shot, but the man she believed planned the whole thing. October 29, 2024, 2 weeks before Juliana Perez Magalhães was scheduled to go to trial for second-degree murder. She appeared in a Fairfax County courtroom, and she changed everything. Are you entering your guilty plea because you are in fact guilty of this offense? Chief Judge Penny Askerit asked Juliana. Juliana said yes. She pleaded guilty to manslaughter in the killing of Joseph Ryan. The original second-degree murder charge? Dropped. The firearms charge? Dropped. In exchange, Juliana agreed to do one thing: testify against Brendan Banfield. She would take the stand at his trial. She would tell the jury everything. What Brendan said, what Brendan planned, what Brendan did. Today's agreement marks a significant step forward in this case, and it is an important development in our pursuit of justice for the victims and their families. Commonwealth's attorney Steve Descano said after the hearing, much of the information that led to this agreement cannot be made public at this time, due to the upcoming criminal trial against the other defendant in this matter. In court, prosecutor Eric Klingon laid out what Juliana had told them. She told prosecutors that she and Brendan used the fetish website to lure Ryan to the house. She told them Ryan believed he was going there to meet Christine for a consensual encounter where he would tie her down and use a knife to cut off her clothes. She told them Christine had no idea about any of it. No idea about the profile. No idea about the messages. No idea a stranger was coming to her home. She described how Ryan showed up and began doing what he thought was the agreed-upon plan, holding Christine at knife point. She described how she and Brendan burst into the bedroom with guns, pretending to be surprised, pretending to discover an intruder, pretending to be rescuers. She described how Brendan yelled "police" and shot Ryan in the head with his IRS service weapon. She described how Brendan then told her to get the Glock from the safe in the bathroom. She described how she shot Ryan in the chest while he was still moving. And she described how, while she was calling 911, Brendan Banfield stabbed his wife, the woman he had married, the mother of his child, the sane nurse who had dedicated her life to helping others. He plunged a knife into her neck while his mistress called for help. But Juliana also said something else. She said she tried to back out. According to Klingon, at various points before the 24th, Perez Magalhães expressed to Brendan Banfield that she did not believe he would go through with this plan, and, at other times, she told him she did not want to continue. But Brendan insisted. He told her it was too late for her to back out. Is that true? Did Juliana really have second thoughts? Did she really try to stop the murder from happening? Or is it something her lawyers negotiated to make her look less culpable? A way to shift more blame onto Brendan and make Juliana look like she was just following orders? The jury will have to decide whether to believe her. Juliana faces up to 10 years in prison for the manslaughter charge. But prosecutors recommended something shocking: time served. If she cooperates fully with Brendan's prosecution, if she takes the stand and testifies truthfully, the Commonwealth will recommend she be sentenced to the time she's already spent in jail. She could walk free after Brendan's trial. The woman who shot Joseph Ryan in the chest. The woman who helped plan the murder of her employer. The woman who moved into the master bedroom and hung her clothes in the dead woman's closet. She could walk free. Joseph Ryan's family agreed to the terms of the plea deal. They want Brendan convicted more than they want Juliana punished. Their priority is justice for their son. And they believe the only way to get that justice is to put Brendan Banfield behind bars for the rest of his life. In Brazil, Juliana's mother, Marina Perez Souza, has watched this case unfold from thousands of miles away. She gave an interview earlier this year before Brendan was charged. She questioned why no one other than her daughter had been arrested. "I pray for the prosecutors and the judge to understand who is guilty in this case," she said in Portuguese, "because it is not Juliana." Her prayers were partially answered. Brendan was eventually charged, but Juliana still pleaded guilty to killing a man. She still admitted to firing the shot that devastated Joseph Ryan's heart. Maybe she was manipulated. Maybe she was pressured. Maybe she really did try to back out. But Joseph Ryan is still dead, and she pulled the trigger. If you're still watching, like, share, subscribe now, and hit that notification bell. This case was supposed to go to trial in February 2025. Then it got pushed to October 2025. Then it got pushed again. Part of the delay was Brendan's defense team requesting more time to review evidence and documentation about the police transfers. But part of it was something else entirely. The lead prosecutor had a problem. August 2025, a shopping center parking lot in Fairfax County. Shortly after 8 a.m., Fairfax County Police found Deputy Commonwealth's Attorney Eric Klingon sitting next to his parked vehicle. He was consuming alcohol. At 8 a.m., body camera footage shows Klingon with a beer bottle in one hand and a lit cigarette in the other. "This is a Commonwealth attorney that's drunk," an officer can be heard saying on the recording. Klingon was transported home by an officer and given a court summons for public intoxication. The charge was later dismissed in October, but the damage to the case was done. Eric Klingon was the lead prosecutor on the Banfield case. He was the one who had argued in court about the FetLife profile. He was the one who had laid out the prosecution's catfishing theory. He was the one who had secured Juliana's cooperation and negotiated her plea deal. After the parking lot incident, he was placed on leave. He was removed from the Banfield case. The trial was delayed again while a new prosecutor got up to speed on the case. The defense will absolutely use this. They can argue that the prosecution has been mishandled, that the investigation was compromised, that the case against Brendan is built on a flawed foundation assembled by a prosecutor who was found drunk in a parking lot at 8 a.m. Whether any of this affects the jury remains to be seen. Brendan Banfield has pleaded not guilty to all charges. His defense attorney, John Carroll, has been aggressive in attacking the prosecution's case at every opportunity. "The investigation is flawed," Carroll said in court. "It is a theory in search of facts rather than a series of facts supporting a theory." Here's what the defense will likely argue at trial. The digital forensics don't support the catfishing theory. Digital examiner Brendan Miller's analysis, which was affirmed by the University of Alabama, suggested Christine was in control of her own devices. Juliana is lying to save herself. She's a confessed killer who got a sweetheart plea deal. She has every reason to blame Brendan and minimize her own role. Brendan's original story might be true. Ryan really did bring a knife. Ryan really was in the bedroom with Christine. Brendan really did shoot him to protect his family. The investigation was compromised. Detectives who disagreed with command staff were transferred. Evidence that contradicted the prosecution's theory was suppressed or ignored. The lead prosecutor was found drunk in a parking lot at 8 a.m. How can the jury trust a case built by someone with that kind of judgment? In court filings, Brendan has maintained his innocence. His version of events: after he left for work on February 24th, Ryan entered the home. Brendan subsequently returned after Juliana called him. He found Ryan in the bedroom holding a knife to his wife's neck. He identified himself as law enforcement. He ordered Ryan to drop the knife. Instead, Ryan plunged the knife into Christine's neck. Brendan shot Ryan and attempted to render aid to his wife. "The evidence just doesn't add up to him killing his wife," Carroll said. But prosecutors have Juliana. They have the blood evidence showing Christine's blood was smeared onto Ryan. They have the new phones obtained within 8 days of the murders. They have the McDonald's parking lot timeline. They have the gun range visits. And they have 570 days of investigation that led a grand jury to indict. January 12, 2026. Fairfax County Circuit Court. Cameras will be in the courtroom. The trial is expected to last approximately 4 weeks, and 12 jurors will have to answer one question. Did Brendan Banfield plot to murder his wife and frame an innocent man? Or did he shoot a real intruder in self-defense? Brendan Banfield faces 4 counts of aggravated murder. In Virginia, aggravated murder can result in life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He also faces charges of using a firearm in commission of a felony, child abuse, and child endangerment. If convicted on all counts, Brendan Banfield will never leave prison. He is 40 years old. He could spend the next 40, 50, 60 years behind bars. His daughter, now 7 years old, will grow up without him. She'll visit her father through prison glass. She'll explain to friends why her dad can't come to her graduations, her wedding, the birth of her own children. All because prosecutors say he wanted to be with the au pair. Juliana Perez Magales will take the stand. She will describe the affair that began in August 2022. The planning that stretched over months. The FetLife scheme. The voice calls where she pretended to be Christine. The gun range visits where Brendan trained her to shoot. She will describe the morning of February 24, 2023. The McDonald's parking lot. The phone calls. Taking the child to the basement. She will describe bursting into that bedroom with a gun in her hand. She will describe shooting Joseph Ryan in the chest. She will describe watching Brendan stab his wife. The defense will attack her credibility with everything they have. They will point out that she's a confessed killer who got a reduced sentence. They will argue she's blaming Brendan to save herself. They will highlight every inconsistency in her story. But prosecutors believe her testimony will be corroborated by the physical evidence, the digital trail, and the timeline of events. Her sentencing is scheduled for after Brendan's trial, giving prosecutors leverage to ensure she tells the truth. Before I finish, I need to remind you who the victims are in this case. Christine Banfield was 37 years old. She was a registered nurse who worked at Inova Fairfax Hospital. Before that, she was a sexual assault nurse examiner, a SANE nurse in New York, where she spent her career helping sexual assault survivors with trauma-informed care and forensic evidence collection. She was a mother. Her daughter was 4 years old when she died. Christine had no idea her husband was planning to kill her. She didn't know about the affair. She didn't know about the FetLife profile. She didn't know that her photo was being used to lure a stranger to her home. She went to bed on February 23, 2023, thinking she was safe in her own home. She never woke up. Joseph Ryan was 39 years old. He was from Springfield, Virginia. He had no criminal record. His friend described him as an old-fashioned man who respected women. He was manipulated into bringing the knife that would be used to attack Christine. Then he was shot twice to eliminate him as a witness. He was used as a prop. Patsy, a fall guy. His life was sacrificed so 2 people could get away with murder. His mother waited 570 days for someone to be charged with his killing. And then there's the child. She's 7 years old now. Her mother is dead. Her father is in jail awaiting trial for murder. The au pair who was supposed to care for her helped plan her mother's death and is now testifying to send her father to prison. She lost everything because the adults in her life made monstrous choices. There's a cruel irony in this case. Brendan Banfield was an IRS criminal investigator. His job was to catch people who break the law. He was trained to investigate crimes, to follow digital trails, to build cases against criminals. Now he sits in a courtroom, the subject of an investigation that used those same techniques against him. His digital trail led to his arrest. His messages were recovered. His scheme was exposed. The investigator became the investigated. And everything he thought he could hide has been laid bare. If you want to follow this trial, subscribe now to Crime Case Voices. I'll be covering every major development. Drop your verdict in the comments. Type guilty if you believe Brendan planned these murders. Type innocent if you believe his self-defense story. The trial begins January 12th. 2 victims demand justice. 1 federal agent's freedom hangs in the balance. The truth is about to come out. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware,